Thank you, Mr. Chair. You are now live.
All right, thank you. So welcome to the 22nd of June Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. As we get underway, we acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So welcome. We have an agenda in front of us, and our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was May 25th. So if I could have a motion from the floor to approve these minutes, unless there is a discussion about them that should ensue first.
I so move, Mr. Chair. Lois speaking.
Lois, thank you, Lois.
I'll second the motion. Cassandra.
Okay, thank you. So those in favor of approving the minutes as written, can I hear some ayes?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Councillor. Any nays? No? Okay, well then that is carried. So we should approve next the order of business. The order of business and approve any additions or deletions. And I don't believe there are any additions or deletions at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Through the Municipal Clerk's Office, we've received no request for additions or deletions as of this time.
Yeah, okay, so then can I get a motion to approve the order of business?
I so move.
Councillor
Iona.
Sutter, thank you. And
I can second that.
Sandra, thank you. So those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? No, okay. Is there any business arising out of the minutes from the last meeting?
Thank you, Chair. No business arising out of the minutes.
Okay, next we need to call for conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that should be expressed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councillor Hensby here for case number, item number 9.1.3, case H00536.
Okay.
I have to declare a conflict of interest as my participation in the Akuma board.
Okay, just for that particular item.
That's correct, just for that item only.
Okay, thank you. So Simon, I guess as we get to that point, Councillor Hensby will leave the room, I believe.
Yes, I can just read the brief note I have in my minutes for conflict of interest policy, where a member declares a conflict of interest for a matter. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act requires the member to declare the conflict and the general nature of it, leave the meeting for the duration of the item, and to refrain from making comments or engaging in debate regarding the item. In the context of a virtual meeting, we would ask members who've declared conflicts of interest to leave the Zoom meeting, to watch the meeting from the live YouTube webcast for that item, and to rejoin the meeting following the conclusion of the item. We would also ask members to refrain from using the chat function of the meeting for comments and discussion regarding the meeting topics, but to instead use these only for requests to speak, and the clerk will also post scoring for any matters under evaluation for information tracking purposes only.
Okay, great. Sounds very straightforward. Do we have no deferred business? Do we have any correspondence, petitions, or delegations for this meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Heritage Advisory Committee, we have no correspondence as of this meeting. However, we do have a petition that was circulated from Peggy Walt, signed by over 5,700 individuals, calling on the Dalhousie to halt the proposed demolition of 1245 Edward Street in Halifax. That petition has been circulated to all members of the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Thank you. So this is the first time that we've received a petition in quite a long time. I'm not quite sure what our options are. Would it be appropriate to perhaps ask the staff what they can tell us about this particular property, and we can perhaps discuss where we're going to go from there, how we react to this petition.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I can speak to this fairly succinctly. So this is a late Victorian property on Edward Street that is owned by Dalhousie University. You might be aware that the university has been purchasing residential properties, mainly single family homes and duplexes sort of in that neighborhood to expand the campus over the last, well, several decades, I would say. My understanding is that there is a plan to demolish the existing building and use it as a surface parking lot. I do not believe that that use is currently permitted under the center plan, so there may be some moving pieces there, but there is an active demolition permit application with the municipality for that property. It has not yet been granted because there's still some additional conditions that the university has to meet before that permit is issued. We are currently processing a third-party heritage registration application for that property that was submitted by Ms. Walt and by William Breckenridge on behalf of the Friends of the Common. It should be before you for consideration at your next meeting in July.
I look forward to seeing that next time then. Is it likely that demolition permit will be approved before we have a chance to meet again as a committee?
It's hard to say. Honestly, now that this is in the media, there might be additional pressure on Dalhousie to rethink their plans. But as soon as they meet the conditions under the Building Code Act for the issuance of that permit, there won't be anything that we can do. They can act on that once it's issued. Of course, once it comes to HAC, if it's able to come to this committee before that permit is issued, once you've evaluated it, and if it scores over 50, it will be protected by the Act for up to 90 days until council considers it for full registration.
Okay, that sounds good. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens at our next meeting and take it from there. Does anyone have any thoughts on the petition? I know we just received it, so perhaps not everyone's had a chance to read it yet, but it has been in the media. So.
Lois here. I believe there is a lot of public interest in this, and I am wondering if there is any way that it could be expedited within HAC rather than waiting for late July. And I appreciate what Aaron has told us. I think we're still at risk, although the public interest is running high. But what are our options within HAC? Advance the July meeting, wait for the regular time in July. Excuse me. Are there any other options?
Through the chair to you, Ms. York, I would say that we can probably find some advice from our legal services regarding the Heritage Property Act and how we might be able to expedite the evaluation of the property if that's the way the committee would like to proceed. Unfortunately, with a typical staff report, it usually takes about 3 to 4 weeks at a bare minimum for that report to get through various levels of management to be signed off by the CAO before it makes it to your committee. Our plan is to expedite that as quickly as we can so that we can get it to your regularly scheduled July meeting. I don't think that we can get around that process of approvals for the report, but there may be other options under the Act that we can explore.
And through the chair, I thank you for that, Aaron. I understand the impediments and the challenges that are there.
Thanks, Aaron. Anyone else have any comments before we move along? We'll definitely revisit this next time we meet. So are there any information items brought forward, Simon? Again,
No, there are no information items brought forward from the last meeting.
Okay, so now we can move on to, we have 3 properties to look at today, and I guess we'll kick it off right now with 2287 Brunswick Street, case number H00512. So if we could hear about that. Simon, I'm not hearing anything. Do you know if staff is prepared to report on this property, or?
I believe that Jenny Lugar is giving this presentation, and she has unmuted and shown her camera, though it doesn't appear that there's any sound or video coming. Maybe Jenny, if you can just send me send me a message if you're having trouble, and we can do some troubleshooting.
Give her a second.
Hi, Simon. This is Aaron. I know that Jenny is presenting through Zoom through her browser today. I don't know if that would cause any issue, but if she's unable to get that figured out in the next minute or so, would it be possible for her to call in and just have you share your screen with the slides?
Hi, Aaron. Yep, I've just reached out to Corey Smith to hopefully give Jenny some assistance. But yeah, if we are unable to quickly sort this out, then that would be a viable option as well.
Okay. Apologies to the committee. This is sometimes when we use Zoom for the first time as staff, and Jenny is of course new to our staff, there can be some wrinkles. So my apologies.
It happens. No worries.
Yeah, so Corey is unavailable at the moment to provide additional assistance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide the call-in information to Jenny, and then I will share the slides on her behalf.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Yep.
Give me a second here. Sorry, everybody. Okay, I have permission for my video here.
I've got the presentation and I'll upload that now. We might need to make sure that you get the Zoom client in the near future, but for the next meeting. But for now, I can definitely get your slides up.
Okay, I should be able to share my screen actually. But sure, we can use Simon's. Simon, can you hear me still?
Yep, I can still hear you. I can't see your slides at the moment, unfortunately, though.
Okay, I can put those up.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you
I
do
should
that.
be able to share those. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm not going to be on video as much as I'd love to join you today. Oh, it's Simon. It actually says I'm not allowed to share the slides.
Yep, that could be an issue associated with the browser. So I'll go ahead and share your slides.
Okay, sure. I will just say next slide when I'm ready. Okay, terribly sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody, and sorry that you can't see me today. I promise I look the same as I did not long ago when you all saw me. I'm happy to be here today joining you to present case H00512, which is the request to include 2287 Brunswick Street in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality. Next slide, please. On June 15th, 2021, an application was received from the property owner of 2287 Brunswick Street to consider the inclusion of the property in the registry. Then in early 22, the property was sold to a new owner, and staff have been in touch with this new owner and have been able to confirm their support for the application. So it's moving forward as a first party application. 2287 Brunswick Street is located in the north end of Halifax on Brunswick Street, across from the former St. Patrick's School site and a few doors down from the St. Patrick's Church and the St. Patrick's Church Glebe House, which are both municipally registered heritage properties. There are a number of other municipally registered heritage properties along this stretch of Brunswick, and it's noteworthy for many on the committee that this was a heritage area under the Halifax MPS, which has since been replaced by the Regional Centre Plan. The Regional Centre Plan now identifies this area as a future HCD, Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. So the property shown in this picture here is currently a small multi-unit building with residential tenants living in it. Next slide, please. So we're going to begin our evaluation, and I'll proceed as the committee has been accustomed to, where I'm pausing after each category to allow the committee to pass it back to the chair to allow the committee to discuss. So first we start with age. The subject property is part of a remarkably intact heritage streetscape that was constructed largely by wealthy merchant families through the mid to late 19th century. In 1861, merchant John Conrad West acquired the land, then known as 123 Brunswick Street, from William A. McCaggie and his wife Sarah Jane McCaggie. The house was then constructed the following year in 1862. Members of the West family additionally were responsible for the construction of several residences along this section of Brunswick Street. Next slide, please. John C. West died in 1878, and the house stayed in the West family for another decade until it was sold in 1888 to the Sisters of Charity, who made some modifications to the building over the next several decades. Next slide, please. So based on the construction date of 1872, staff is recommending a score of 16 points, and I will hand it back over to the chair for discussion.
All right. 16 points, shall we discuss? Built in 1862. We're kind of pinned down on this, given that we have a date. So can I hear some ayes for 16?
Aye.
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 Anyone care to argue for a different number or say nay? All right, 16 it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. So next category we're looking at is historical importance, specifically here historical relationships. As I mentioned earlier, the dwelling has historical associations with the West family, and more particularly with John Conrad West. Throughout the mid to late 19th century, the West family's enterprises grew to include a total of 3 wharves in the Halifax Harbor, shown on the map on this slide here, and 10 stores, a large warehouse, 2 offices, and 8 vessels. All of this contributing to making the family a prominent and wealthy family in Halifax at the time. Next slide, please. So following the death of John Conrad West, the property was sold to the Sisters of Charity in 1888. The property then became the new St. Patrick's Convent, which was led by the sisters. It's important to note at this point, while we're looking at historical relationships, that the Sisters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul of Halifax, as they were later known, were eventually responsible for staffing the Maritime's only residential school, the Shubenacadie Indian School, from 1930 to 1967. At this school, Indigenous children who had been separated from their families were subjected to harsh discipline, malnutrition and starvation, poor health care, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, medical experimentation, neglect, and the deliberate suppression of their cultures and languages, and loss of life. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a unique situation, although we're going to see it twice today, despite the fact that there is sufficient information to evaluate this property under criteria 2A, given the historical associations with the Sisters of Charity, who were instrumental in the history of residential schools in Nova Scotia. It is staff's recommendation that we recognize this property for its merits of architectural style under category 2B. The evaluation criteria does give us the option to recommend evaluating under one or the other. So under category 2B, 2287 Brunswick Street is considered highly representative of residential Italianate architecture with its symmetrical front fascia, paired rounded head windows, ornate moldings, and substantial cornice. It is at the same time fairly unique, being a comparatively rare brick and stucco example of Italianate architecture, where most residential Italianate architecture that we see in Halifax is found in homes of wooden construction. Next slide, please. So should the committee agree to score the subject property under category 2B instead of 2A in recognition of the historical associations of the building with residential schools in Nova Scotia, then staff recommend a score for architectural style between 11 and 15 points based on the building's Italianate style and the unique use of brick and stucco construction. I'll hand that back over to the chair.
All right, thanks, Jenny. I think it's completely appropriate to score this in terms of architectural style, and I think it's also appropriate for quite a high mark. Would anyone care to number on this between 11 and 15? Would anyone suggest a 15?
Lois speaking, I would suggest a 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. It's Cassandra. I don't think there's a lot of property that has the Italian influence in this area.
This is Leslie. I would support that as well, 14 or 15.
Okay, and Councillor Hensby also says 15. So those in favor of scoring a 15, please say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, so 15 it is. Thanks, Sharon. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our next category, sorry everybody, our next category is the significance of the architect and or builder. So the West family was known to have employed architecture firms for other properties on Brunswick Street, and they did have familial ties to Edward Elliott, who was the architect of the former Universalist Church of the Redeemer, located at 2128 Brunswick Street. However, unfortunately, historical research was unable to determine who the architect or builder was for 2287 Brunswick Street, and therefore staff are recommending a score of 0. I should briefly mention that, as many of you are aware, staff are currently working on a revised evaluation criteria to help address some discrepancies, such as the necessity to award 0 points, and in the instance that we find 0 or no information is available. So we are hoping to bring some ideas before HAC sometime this fall at the earliest for discussion. I'll hand it back over to Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, it is disappointing when we don't know anything and have to consequently leave a score of 0, but I don't think we have too much of a choice. Those in favor of the 0, please let us hear. Aye.
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 Yeah. Anyone care to argue for a higher number? All right, so we'll stick with a 0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next category is category 4A, architectural merit for construction type. So as I mentioned earlier, 2287 Brunswick Street is a brick construction building, which is unique for the residential Italianate architecture in Halifax. The front facade is also covered with stucco, making it unique as well. And the ornate moldings and brackets are indicative of a high level of skill and craftsmanship. Next slide, please. Based on this, staff are recommending a score of 7 to 10 points. I'll hand that back over to the chair.
Thank you. So between 7 and 10, would anyone like to throw out a number? I think this is a beautiful building.
I'd throw it a 10.
Or a 10, all right.
I like that too.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll support that as well.
Yeah, okay.
I would support that. It's a beautiful
Thanks.
building.
Yeah, all right, so a 10.
Okay, thank you, committee. Next is architectural merit for the style. So as we've discussed, to the Italianate style, this building was built in the Italianate style, which was popular between 1860 and 1890, making this an early example of this style in Halifax. There are several character defining elements, as you can see here, but those include the symmetrical facade, the prominent cornice, which features foliated corbels, modillions, and medallions, and the cast iron balcony on the second story. Next slide, please. So this architectural style, as I mentioned, is an early example of the Italianate style, which features some rare architectural characteristics. Therefore, staff are recommending a score between 7 and 10 points. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. So a score between 7 and 10. Would anyone want to kick it off?
I'd support a 10 again.
10 again? Okay.
I would support a 10. It's beautiful.
I would echo that, a 10.
All right. Okay, so I guess we're in agreement, 10 on style.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So next we get to architectural integrity. On the slide, you'll see photos of the property from the 1880s and then later on the right from 1968. So 2287 Brunswick Street was originally constructed with a square plan and featured an ornate octagonal belvedere, shown in the picture on the left there, and a central round arched parapet framing a large medallion, also shown on the image on the left. In 1895, and then in subsequent additions to the building, which were commissioned by the Sisters of Charity, the original roof line, including the belvedere, chimneys, and parapet, were removed. This was then replaced with a new mansard roof featuring the 3 pedimented dormers shown in the right picture here. Next slide, please. More recently, the granite block foundation and the remaining Italianate moldings have been painted black, and the curving front staircase was removed and replaced. Additionally, the sandstone plinths of the pilasters are visibly crumbling, and the front door is non-original to the home. The remaining architectural features beyond those appear to be in good condition. While the building's facade is largely intact, there have been some notable alterations to the building, as shown in the pictures from the previous slide, and therefore staff are recommending a score of 1 to 5 points. I'll hand it back to the chair.
All right, thank you. So we have to assess the architectural integrity, and the building has been vastly altered. So we're going to recommend something between a 1 and a 5. What sort of thoughts are there on this? It's lost an entire top story, etc.
Can I see the previous picture, please? Iona. Okay.
It had a cupola on it at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And then a mansard roof, and now has gone back to the original configuration, but without the cupola or the end pieces or the railing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The windows are still very distinctive.
Oh, yes.
It's still
yes.
the same house. So
I give it a 3.
yeah.
I would agree, Councillor Hensby, a 3.
We have 3 on the table. All right, I guess 3 it is.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next and final category is the relationship to the surrounding area. So this area of Brunswick Street was originally a working class suburb founded by German immigrant tradesmen and their families, but it was upheaved in the mid-19th century by the merchant class who arrived and built ornate mansions. This influx of wealth generated a diverse residential and ecclesiastical, many of you are familiar with the churches in this area, which crafted the remarkably intact streetscape that we see today. The property surroundings are largely 2 to 3 story residential buildings of diverse architectural styles. Brunswick Street is home to 37 registered heritage properties, and those within the same block, a few are shown here. As the subject property include Fraser House, St. Patrick's Catholic Church, Eustace House, and West House. Based on this, staff are recommending a score between 6 and 10. I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So a score between 6 and 10. Again, I would ask for a suggestion.
I suggest a 7 or 8. If it had some of the original components, I would give it a higher score. But some of the similarities are still there with the window lines and the building structure and stuff. Too bad the man's roof was gone, and we got a 9 or a 10 out of me, or the original roof line with the top and the railings would have got a 12, but for me. But I'd give it a 7 or an 8.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else care to give some thoughts on this?
Lois here, I would support an 8.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anyone else supporting an 8?
I'd support an 8 as well, David.
Okay. All right, I think I'm happy with an 8 myself, so so let's go for 8.
David, it's Cassandra. Can I ask a question? Have we ever used the number of buildings that already have heritage status in the area as, you know, a bit of a measure for how much a new one contributes? Like if there were 20 buildings in the area, I'd be more inclined to give it an 8 or 9, but if there's only a handful, then my score would be a little bit lower.
Cassandra, I might be able to take a stab at answering that question for you there. Jenny here. So the way that this category is that it doesn't necessarily enumerate the number of buildings that are similar era or style, but it does recognize that it would be a contributing asset. And of course, if that area is a very, you know, kind of fundamentally heritage characterized area, then we do typically recommend higher points. That said, I can certainly take that thought under consideration for, you know, kind of looking at looking specifically at all the assets that are around it and taking that into consideration in the review of the evaluation criteria that I'm working on right now.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jenny, sorry.
No problem.
I knew a Judy Lugar one time long ago.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Aaron Murnahan here, just confirming. I just did a quick count. There are 34 registered heritage properties on Brunswick Street. If that helps.
All right, thank you.
That does help.
Well, I'm not getting any audio. Nope.
Are we ready to go?
Yes, Jenny, please carry on.
Okay, sorry. My apologies, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. So as you'll see, this is the recommendation that you can also find in the report. I think Simon can leave that up on the screen, and I will hand it back over to you, Mr. Chair, and the committee. Thank you very much.
All right, so is there any discussion in general on this property before we actually put the motion?
Yeah, so I see the tally is 62, so it meets the threshold, so it's good.
Sorry, was Lois talking as well?
No.
No, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, if there's no further discussion, then could I get someone to put the motion?
I can read the motion. David here.
Thank you, David.
It is recommended that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council set a date for a heritage hearing to consider the inclusion of 2287 Brunswick Street as shown on map 1 in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality, and 2, approve the request to include 2287 Brunswick Street as shown on map 1 in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality as a municipal heritage property.
Second it.
Thank you, Councillor, for seconding. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Good. The motion is carried. So thank you, Jenny, and I'm very glad to have this building included in our collection. So the next one we have to discuss is case number H00537, which is a request to include 1102 Purcell's Cove Road in Halifax in the municipal registry. So if we could hear about Purcell's Cove Road, please.
Hello, I'm back. Jenny here again. So as the chair said, this is case H00537 1102 Purcell's Cove Road, a request to include the property in the registry of municipal property for the Halifax Regional Municipality. Next slide, please, Simon. So on April 26, 2022, an application was made by FBM on behalf of the property owner Anchor Living Limited to consider the inclusion of 1102 Purcell's Cove Road in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality. 1102 Purcell's Cove Road is the site of the former St. John the Baptist Catholic Church and the associated parochial school. It's located on Purcell's Cove Road, shortly after the fork with Herring Cove Road and close to the subdivision known as Braeburn. Next slide, please. So the site, the property shown here is located on a stretch of Purcell's Cove Road with several low-rise multi-unit buildings and other low-density dwellings and a mix of residential and commercial uses. Immediately adjacent to the site of the church at 1110 Purcell's Cove Road is the former church rectory, which contains a building that was built in the later half of the 21st century, or sorry, the 20th century. Next slide, please. So the evaluation begins with the age. The site of the former church and parochial school were conveyed to the Roman Catholic and Episcopal Corporation. The present church building was erected on this site in 1929, and it was built to replace a former powder magazine, which had been serving as a mission church for the community beginning in 1920. Next slide, please. Based on a construction date of 1929, staff recommend a score of 5 points. I will hand it back over to Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. So once again, we're sort of pinned down by chronology. I hear 5 points. Anyone care to agree or disagree?
I agree with 5.
So do I.
Lois, thank you. Okay.
Yes.
So 5 sounds good.
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hold on.
I do have a question, not regarding the age, but this has been put forward for designation as a registered heritage property. What does the developer intend to do with the church? Because it is no longer a functioning church. That may not be an appropriate question from me, but I am curious. Is it known? Should it factor in our thinking here?
Let you know, Lois, that the heritage building gets designation. I believe Aaron can clarify, but I think you get some development bonuses in regards to trying to keep the integrity of the heritage building stuff. Regardless, you might get some more density bonusing opportunities and funding.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I can speak briefly to that. So within this area of the municipality, it's still under the Halifax Secondary Municipal Plan, and that has policy 6.8, which allows a development agreement on any registered heritage property. So this committee has seen a number of those in the past few years. There are plans likely for a multi-unit residential building on this property, but I would certainly encourage the committee to score this property based on its heritage merit. And if there is a future development proposal, that will be coming forward to the committee as a substantial alteration application, which you can consider once we have all of the details.
And through the chair, thank you, Aaron. That solidifies my thinking. Thanks.
All right, Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned last time in the previous presentation, we are going to look at both categories 2A and 2B, and staff have a recommendation on which we should use to evaluate this property. So Under 2A, the historical importance under historical relationships, 1102 Purcell's Cove Road is most prominently associated with two historical figures, including John Egan, who recognized the growing need for a parish in the Armdale neighborhood and conveyed the land to the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation. The second is Reverend Peter Martin, shown on this slide, who fundraised a significant amount of money towards the construction of a new church and went on to be the minister of St. John the Baptist Church from 1929 to 1954. So in determining whether to recommend evaluation under criteria 2A or 2B, staff reviewed the historical relationship of the church with Reverend Peter F. Martin. It was found during this research that Reverend Martin was responsible for staging several minstrel shows throughout his tenure, which were a common form of 19th and early 20th century entertainment, which were deeply rooted in anti-Black racism and employed blackface and racial stereotyping to express nostalgia for slavery and racist violence. Therefore, based on this understanding, staff are recommending that Reverend Martin's contribution to the church's history not be considered to add to the historical value of the property in any way. Next slide, please. Instead, staff are recommending that the building be evaluated for its historical importance based on its architectural style. So the former St. John the Baptist Church was constructed in the Spanish Mission Revival style, an extremely unique style for Atlantic Canada and only very rarely found in ecclesiastical buildings elsewhere in Canada. It's defined by its dual octagonal bell towers, decoratively shaped parapets, and use of round or Roman arches in the windows and moldings, among other features. Next slide, please. Based on the extremely unique Spanish Mission Revival style of the former church, staff recommend a score between 16 and 20 points. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. That certainly is unique. I had no idea that was there. So a 16 to a 20 in terms of its architectural style. Does anyone want to throw out a number to start us off with?
Since it's mainly still intact from the 20s, I would give it a nice 20.
Yeah. Next, Councillor. Anyone care to echo a 20?
I'd support a 20.
Yeah. Okay.
I would support a 20 if I own it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. All right, so I think I would lean toward a 19, but I'll defer to the rest and let's say 20.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next category is the significance of the architect or builder. So the former St. John the Baptist Church was designed by David Francis Saxton. Saxton enjoyed a long career in the province, operating his own architectural practice, then working for the firm C.A. Fowler & Co., working for the Department of Highways and Public Works, and finally teaching at the Nova Scotia Technical College. He designed buildings seen on the slide before you, such as 1571 Barrington Street and 6466 Jubilee Road, which are both still standing. He did design others, such as the former exhibition grounds housing in the North End and the former infectious diseases hospital at University and Robie Streets, both of which buildings have since been demolished. Next slide, please. Based on this, staff recommend a score of 1 to 3 for Saxton's local significance. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, so a score between 1 and 3. It's certainly locally significant. So a 3, anyone? A 2.
How about a 2?
I would support a 2, Lois.
Yeah? Okay.
Buildings are not immediately obvious to us, but it's good to have them pointed out.
Mm-hmm. I think a 2 sounds reasonable. Let's go for a 2 then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. Next category is architectural merit for construction type. So the church building is built of heavy frame timber construction, heavy timber framed construction, my apologies, which is a typical construction type and technology for churches built during this period. Based on that, staff are recommending a score of 1 to 3 for this construction type. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
And once again, I put it to members, a number between 1 and 3.
We're not going to see too many more heavy timbered buildings being built, so I would go for a 3.
That's the truth. Yeah.
It's Cassandra.
Anyone else for 3?
I support a 3, David.
Yeah, I think I do as well in this case. So I guess 3 it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next category is next slide there, please. Simon? Oh, there we go. Thank you. The next category is category 4B, architectural merit for style. So as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, the church was constructed in the Spanish Mission Revival style, which is based on the style of the Spanish missions in California during the 18th and 19th centuries. The style is exceedingly rare in ecclesiastical buildings in Atlantic Canada and includes such character-defining elements as the 2 dual towers of Moorish-inspired octagonal design, the central row of 4 round-headed windows, the double central door with semicircular transept and spherical label tops, and several others. Also noteworthy is the pre-1845 statue of St. John the Baptist, which was brought from Rome by Archbishop Walsh, and previously installed in the tower niche of the former St. John's Rest on Mumford Road. The statue coincidentally was removed and installed at the St. John the Baptist Church in 1928, only 3 days before a fire destroyed St. John's Rest on Mumford Road. So we're lucky to still have it. Next slide, please. So based on this architectural style being exceedingly rare in Atlantic Canada, staff are recommending a score between 7 and 10 points. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay. Yeah, this is indeed exceptionally rare for Atlantic Canada. Would anyone care to throw out a 10?
I'd support a 10, David.
Yeah.
I'd support a 10.
So would I.
Yeah, that's
Yes, Lois. Yeah.
okay. 10 for sure then. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. So the next category is architectural integrity. Shown here is a picture on the left from 1945, and then one that is contemporary to a few weeks ago. So the church building maintains a very good level of architectural integrity based on its original design and construction between 1928 and 1929. There were 2 primary changes that were made over time. The first was a 1948 rear addition to accommodate the parochial school, which was created through the rear of the church basement and had no impact on any of the building's character-defining elements. The second, which was made sometime after 1972, the narthex, or the entry vestibule, was widened to accommodate a pair of front-facing flanking doors. So you can see this difference between the picture on the left and the picture on the right. These doors appear to have been reused from the sides of the original narthex, similarly to the windows, which were removed and reinstated on either side of the narthex. And finally, in terms of condition, the building is in very good overall condition. Next slide, please. Based on this, staff recommends a score of 11 to 15 points for integrity. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. So 11 to 15. Unlike the previous property, this one, largely unchanged, I would agree with. Anyone want to throw a number?
Cassandra, I would say 14. I was playing that little game, what has changed. And the only thing I could really notice were the stairs. And it's understandable that they had to change them just for functionality so that more doors could be open, more people could come in and out. But it really does change the look of the building as far as I'm concerned. So I can't do a 15 for that reason, but certainly high.
The 14 is good.
Yeah.
I agree with Cassandra Slopes.
14?
14.
I'd support a 14 as well, David.
All right, sounds good. 14 it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And our final category is the relationship to the surrounding area. So the church has a strong relationship to the neighborhood as the tallest and most architecturally prominent building in the vicinity. It's intimately related with the Braeburn subdivision, which was created in 1914. This subdivision was very illustrative of the shifting demographics as people began to leave the city and development began to really take off on the mainland during the post-war boom. The church was built partially as a result of this growing neighborhood, and the neighborhood and the church together really represent a remarkably intact early 20th century neighborhood. Next slide here, please. So due to the church's prominence in the surrounding area and its strong relationship to the neighborhoods in its vicinity, staff recommend a score between 6 and 10 points. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Hey, thank you. All right, so relationship to surrounding area, anywhere between 6 and 10 points. I would also argue for something in the higher range on this category. Anyone have any thoughts? Does it deserve a 10? I'm not as familiar with this neighborhood as I should be, so I have to defer to someone else.
I would say, Lois speaking, an 8 or a 9. It is tied to the subdivision. They're all of a time and a place. And Jenny, did you say that the building across the street was first one of the rectories? Did I get that garbled?
Oh, sorry, everybody. Yes, it was one of the rectories.
Okay.
And was the Greek Orthodox Church down around the corner has a similar design with the round towers and stuff? Just kind of say it has a kind of similarity, but in a newer context.
I believe.
Sorry, through the chair, could you repeat that question, Councillor?
The Greek Orthodox Church around the corner from this facility, this kind of has a similar type of design with round towers and stuff. It has a unique similarity, but it's built with brick versus wood.
Yes, through the chair to the councillor. It's actually next door. So the building in between the Greek Orthodox Church and the former St. John the Baptist Church is the rectory that we were talking about that was built in the later half of the 20th century.
Okay. And the Greek Orthodox Church, while many may say, well, it looks very similar in style, it is built, I believe, on a classic Greek pattern of architecture, church architecture. So Mediterranean influence, something like Spanish Mission, but distinctly different to someone who knows their architecture. But I still say that the building that we're discussing here now, St. John the Baptist, is worthy of an 8, probably a 9. That's what I would suggest.
Well, we've heard 7, 8, 9. How about we compromise and give it an 8?
I'm comfortable with an 8.
I support that.
I support that as well, David.
And that's okay with me too.
Sounds good. Let's go for 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. So this is the recommendation, which you can also find in your staff report. And I will pass this back to the chair now that my camera has finally started working. Nice to see everybody today.
It's great to see you again too, Jenny. Okay, so can I have a volunteer from the floor to put this motion forward? Cassandra,
I can do that.
please.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
It is recommended that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council set a date for a heritage hearing to consider the inclusion of the subject property in the Registry of the Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality, and to approve the request to include 1102 Purcell's Cove Road, Halifax, in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality, as shown on Map 1, as a municipal heritage property under the Heritage Property Act.
Thank you. Would anyone care to second that motion?
I'll second it. Lois.
Lois, thank you very much. All those in favor? Oh,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? No, so the motion carries. Thank you very much. Keeping track.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'll excuse myself from the remainder of this case of H00536. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And assuming that the councillor has absented himself, we should carry on with 9.1.3, proposal to, or a request rather, to include 81 Wilfred Jackson Way in Westfall in the municipal registry. So if we could hear a presentation on that.
Hi, my name is Devin Paris, and I'm the African Nova Scotian Cultural Heritage Intern here with Planning and Development and Heritage Department. And I am just popping up my screen here with the presentation. So, can everyone see my presentation?
Looks good.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So this is an application to include 18 Wilfred Jackson Way, or the former Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, to the Registry of Heritage Properties for the Halifax Regional Municipality. So staff have completed a preliminary review using the evaluation criteria for registration of heritage buildings and have provided a recommendation score that I'll go over the course of my presentation. So we have an evaluation criteria included in attachment A of the staff report to help out with your evaluation. So starting with location here, here's a map of the property with the red circle outlining the former Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children campus. The campus is located just south of Highway 107 and the Black Cultural Center of Nova Scotia, and is a couple hundred meters east of the Acoma Family Center. So this is just situated a little bit in Westfall. So if we zoom out on the map, we see that the former Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children is situated to the center, in the center of 5 historic African Nova Scotia communities: Westfall, Cherrybrook, Loon Lake, and North Preston and East Preston. The application was submitted, so here's a picture of the home, present day picture of the home. The application was submitted by the current owners of the property, Akuma Holdings Incorporated. They are seeking registration of the property as a municipal heritage property. I should note that in March of 1998, the former executive director of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, Wilfred Jackson, filed a request for municipal heritage status. The Heritage Advisory Committee awarded 60 out of a possible 100 points and recommended that the Regional Council set a date for a heritage hearing, but the Regional Council deferred its decision due to concerns about the building's deterioration. So as a result, a heritage hearing was never formally held. So before you hear is the scoring criteria. So staff has elected to evaluate the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children as a heritage site, which puts more emphasis on the heritage value of the property as a whole, rather than just the sole building. So it includes 4 criteria. And the criteria that we used were continuity of use, historical importance, degree of intactness or integrity, and relationship to surrounding area for a total possible score, highest possible score of 70 points. So what I'll do now, like the last presentations, I'll just go through each of these criteria one by one, and I'll ask the chair to share discussion of each criteria after I'm done presenting them. So for continuity, starting with continuity of use, the construction for the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children began in 1920 and was completed in 1921. So the campus consists of the cottage, 20 Wilfred Jackson Way, schoolhouse, which is now the Henry G. Bald Center, a farming foundations, and surrounding woodlands. The Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children is now renamed Kinney Place and celebrated its centennial in 2021. So in 1978, the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children Board moved their base of operations to the location of the current Acoma Family Center, and the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children ceased to house any children. However, the site was still central to the local African Nova Scotian communities. The Henry G. Bald School reopened as a community center in 1983 and currently operates as the YMCA Nova Scotia Work Center. The Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children conveyed some of its lands north of the former home to what is now the Black Cultural Center of Nova Scotia in 1977. So the Black Cultural Center is now one of the foremost centers for African Nova Scotian heritage and history in the province, and is an important part of the community in the local African Nova Scotian communities. The community gardens were reopened in 2011 to celebrate the home's 90th anniversary, where they run operations from May to October. The building is also in the process of being repurposed as a commercial facility with a cafe, hair salon, and several offices. So because of the age of the building at 101 years, with the continuity of use of the Henry G. Ball Center, the Black Cultural Center, and the community gardens, staff suggests a score of 20 points. Mr. Chair, how does the committee wish to proceed?
Thanks, Devin. Well, can we hear from the members of the committee? A score between 20 and 25 is appropriate here. Anyone want to narrow that down a bit more? I'm happy to throw out a 25 completely arbitrarily. Anyone have any thoughts? Oh.
I would agree with 25.
Yeah.
The building has been used in many different ways throughout the community, and I think it deserves that recognition.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also support a 25, David.
Okay.
As would I, Lois.
Good. It's good to hear. I would as well.
I as well.
Thank you. Okay, so 25.
Sounds good. So moving on to historical importance, the idea to create the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children was proposed by the first African Nova Scotian to graduate from any university and Nova Scotia's first Black lawyer, James Robinson Johnston. So in 1908. So after Johnston's death, fundraising and petition between 1915 and 1919 led to the construction of the home in 1920. The Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children officially opened on June 6th of 1921 to an audience of over 3,000 people, with the Nova Scotia's Premier and Lieutenant Governor in attendance. So as I mentioned earlier, the operations moved away from the home in 1978 and led to the main house's closure. The building was unused until the renovations in the 2010s were underway. So the home was the first institution to accept orphaned and neglected African Nova Scotian children in the province. It also has connections to prominent figures in the African Nova Scotian community, including James Robinson Johnston, the first graduate of the Maritime Business College, James Alexander Ross Kinney, and Canada's first African Canadian concert singer, Portia White. The Honorable Wayne Adams, and the first African Nova Scotian member of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly, and Gordon S. Earle, the first Black MP elected from Nova Scotia, are also both former presidents of the home. The Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children and its appendages have also been the nucleus of the local African Nova Scotian communities. It's also important to note that the school was the site of various abuses as well, though. Former residents reported that the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children often lacked quality food, clothing, and heating, with children often being hungry and cold during their stays. Some former residents also reported physical, emotional, and sexual abuse during their stays at the home. So these claims were widely ignored by the province and the board of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children at the time, but individual civil claims made against the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children board and the government of Nova Scotia culminated in a class action lawsuit filed against the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children and the province in 2011. So the province issued an apology to the former residents in 2014, and a restorative inquiry was later published in 2019. So though it has a challenging history, the former Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children's positive and negative chapters are intimately related to the African Nova Scotian experience in the 20th century. So given that, staff has recommended a score of 15 to 20 for historical importance. Mr. Chair, how does the committee wish to proceed?
All right, thank you. Do we wish to give this a 15 or a 20 or something in between? Does anyone have any thoughts on that in terms of this property's historical importance? Somebody give me a Councillor Stoddard.
I would at least give it a 20 because the province was involved and it was also involved locally. So I would definitely give it a 20 for its historical importance.
Okay, 20.
This is Leslie. I would support that.
Okay, good. I would as well. I'd support a 20. This is central historically. So, yeah, I think go for 20 with this one.
This is an opportunity. This is Lois speaking. This is an opportunity to acknowledge the apology and to acknowledge the importance, good and bad, and the desire to aim for reconciliation with the Black community. I'd support the 20 as well.
Thank you, Lois. Okay, Devin?
Sounds good. So moving on towards for integrity, the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children building consists of a 3-story wood frame building in the cottage style. It has a moderately pitched gable roof, large centrally located gabled wall dormer with a single window, flanked on both sides by large shed dormers with paired windows. It also has a 2-story rear projection positioned centrally with a gable roof and small shed dormers. The exterior walls and roof trusses that are recladded but still contain the original structural components of the building that opened in 1921. So for the other structures and landscape features, the cottage is a 1.5-story structure containing a gable roof with large central dormers at the front and rear. The Henry G. Bald Center is a 1.5-story building with a hipped gable roof and a central entrance flanked on both sides by paired and single windows. And the community food gardens are located west of the former Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children building. There's also foundations of old farm structures throughout or in the back of the building. So there was a survey completed in 2020, and it has been circulated to the members of the committee that outlines these farm structures. So the building itself has moderate physical integrity enhanced by its cultural. It has moderate physical integrity, but is also enhanced by its cultural integrity. So the property is interconnected with the local African Nova Scotian communities since the Nova Scotia Home for the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children conveyed those lands to the Black Cultural Center. And as such, the site has affected development patterns and shaped the physical makeup of the local communities. So given its modern physical integrity and its high cultural integrity, staff recommends a score of between 6 and 10. So Mr. Chair, how would the committee wish to proceed?
Thanks, Devin. Are there any thoughts on a score between a 6 and a 10? Given what we just heard, I would lean toward a 9 at least. Anyone care to disagree?
I would support an 8 or a 9.
Okay. Anyone else? 8, we have 9.
Iona, I would support a 9 or a 10.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? It sort of averages this out to about 9.
9 would be good.
9 sounds good. All right, we'll go for 9.
I'd support 9.
Back to you, Devin.
Sounds good. So with the final criteria here, context and its relationship to the surrounding area, the site has a high degree of importance to local and provincial African Nova Scotian communities. So as I already mentioned before, the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children was connected to figures like James Robinson Johnson, Portia White, James Alexander Kinney Ross, Wayne Adams, and Gordon S. Earl. So it is integral to the physical heritage character of the local African Nova Scotian communities that it's around. The lands they conveyed in 1977 gave way to the Black Cultural Center of Nova Scotia, as mentioned above, and influenced development patterns of the local area. And the home also celebrates its anniversary every June, with the last year being the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children's centennial anniversary. So there's still, it's still fairly central to the local African Nova Scotian communities in the area. So given its heritage value to the local communities, staff recommends a score of 8 to 10 for relationship to surrounding area. So Mr. Chair, how would the committee like to proceed?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, so we can award 6 to 10 points. Anyone have any thoughts on that? The building's relationship to the surrounding area?
I would give this a 10 because of the relationship to the surrounding areas. I mean, you have Black communities, you have Black children that might have been housed there at one time. You have the Black Cultural Center. You have so much going on that's been effective in one way or the other to the home. So I think it deserves a 10.
Yeah, if you look at its location on the map, it is, I mean, just right in the middle of super old Black communities. It's been central for so long. I would agree for a 10. Anyone else?
I would support a 10 as well, David.
As would I, Lois.
All right, so I think we can go for a 10 with this.
Sounds good.
Okay, good, thank you.
So I have a recommendation here that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend to the Regional Council, and I'll turn that back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, what did our score turn out to be on this particular one?
64.
Oh, okay, good. So we're in the clear. So can I have someone propose this, please? Does anyone want to read out the motion?
I can put the motion. I can put the motion on the floor, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Stoddard, that would be great. Thank you.
It is recommended that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council, 1, set a date for Heritage hearing to consider the inclusion of 18 Wilfred Jackson Way as shown on map 1 in the Registry of Heritage Properties for the Halifax Regional Municipality, and 2, approve the request to include 18 Wilfred Jackson Way as shown on map 1 in the Registry of Heritage Property for Halifax Regional Municipality as a municipal heritage area under the Heritage Property Act. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone care to second that motion?
I will second it.
Leslie?
Oh,
or
okay.
Lois?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Leslie,
You go ahead,
go for
Lois.
it.
Oh, okay. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Leslie, for seconding. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. And those opposed? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, Devin.
When my laptop has gone blank, I no longer have the agenda in front of me. So that completes our items of business today. We have, let me see.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you have,
Yeah.
oh, yep.
Oh, sorry. I guess there are no motions or discussions for what we've already done. There are no added items. So it remains to schedule the date for our next meeting. Sometimes in the summer, we actually skip meetings, but since we're all doing this virtually, it probably would be a good idea to at least commit to doing this virtually on July 27th, if that's okay with everyone. That's the scheduled time for the meeting. And if there are no thoughts on that, I will call for another motion. If someone could make a motion to adjourn until the next time.
Aaron has his hand up there,
Oh,
just in
I
case you
didn't
can.
see. Sorry, Aaron, please.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention to the committee that, yes, we do sometimes give committees a little bit of a break in the summer. You may have noticed that there's been a significant number of items coming before you, and there's a significant number of registration applications with us at the moment. I think we've already beaten the record from last year. We have just about 20 active registration applications in front of us currently, including the Edward Street application. So I would just, I guess I would warn the committee that we will have a number of items for you in both July and August, likely.
Good. Thank you, Aaron. We look forward to them.
We are so warned.
All right, so until the next time, could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
David, thank you very much. That doesn't need to be seconded. So all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 And the
Aye.
motion is carried. Goodbye to everyone until the 27th of July, unless we're called back earlier.
Thank you. Take
Thank you
care.
all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.